Are we ready for live stream? Good morning. I'm Sarah Bodenson. I'm the Director of Interpretation Research and Digital Learning at the Museum of Modern Art. Welcome today. I'm very pleased to welcome you to Wiki Arte, which is the second annual edit-a-thon devoted to creating, improving, and translating Wikipedia articles on Latin American art and culture. Given that our work today will be both communal and digital, I should note that Wiki Arte is taking place well beyond the walls of MoMA, with edit-a-thons in Mexico City today, Caracas on November 11th, and in Buenos Aires on November 12th. And additionally, people will be editing all over the world independently. This morning's panel is also being live streamed, so I wanted to welcome everyone who's joining us from afar. Thanks for tuning in. I wanted to extend a particular thanks to the Colección Patricia Phelps de Cisneros for their generosity, which, as many of you know, extends well beyond their support for today's event to include the recent establishment of an Institute for Latin American Art at MoMA, as well as significant additions in Latin American holdings to MoMA's collection. I also wanted to thank Wikimedia NYC for co-organizing the event, and also to all of the volunteers who you'll be working with and learning from today. So I'm thrilled that we're kicking off Wiki Arte with a conversation between three artists who experiment with and use digital tools to engage with communities, share ideas, and make work through their activism and art practice. So without further ado, I'd like to turn it over to Rocio Aranda Alvarado, a senior curator at El Museo del Barrio, who will moderate this morning's conversation and welcome all the artists. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here. I want to say first that I'm so honored to be among this amazing group of women artists. So I'll introduce each one of them, and they'll talk a little bit about the work, and then we'll have a conversation, and we'll have questions from the audience also. We're going to start today with Sol Aramendi. Sol is an artist and educator. a vocal agent for social change, she founded Project Luz, a nomadic physical and conceptual space for immigrant communities to learn, create, and communicate, allowing for the greatest agency and collaborative opportunity for all of the participants. She uses photography as the main tool of engagement. She holds an MFA in social practice from Queens College, an Arte Útil residency at Immigrant Movement International, a fellowship from the Smithsonian Latino Museum Studies program, and has just completed a Coro Immigrant Civic Leadership program from the Mayor's Office of Immigrant Affairs. She's been working for almost 3 years in the Jornalero Wage Theft app, an app conceived together with the support, research, and dynamic collaboration of immigrant day laborers. Also with artists, organizers, developers, and lawyers. The Jornalero app links the struggle for immigrant workers' rights to the concept of community accountability. The smartphone-based app will fight wage theft and restore power to the worker by allowing users to safely share their experiences and report abusive and neglectful employers, effectively inserting transparency into a previously exploitative and alienating system. Please help me welcome Sol Laramendi.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for coming today. So I want to talk a little bit about my work. I moved from Argentina 13 years ago, and I'm an architect, and I did a master's in furniture design in Argentina, and I was also very interested in photography and work as a photography teacher and taking people around Buenos Aires, combining architecture and photography. When I moved to New York, I became an immigrant, and I created this program called Project Luz, and I wrote to 5 museums asking for free tours in Spanish for my students, for adult immigrants. And I got responses from some of the museums, and the Queens Museum says that they wanted to visit my class. I had an end of the year party in a community organization in Queens, and I had like 100 people. The Queens Museum at that time got a grant from the IMLS for $1 million and a matching grant to bring the community to the museum. So they did the tour in Spanish, but then they invite me to be that person that I was asking for, the person that is going to be the access part of the museum, bringing immigrant communities to the museum and doing different engagements. In these workshops, that then Project Luz is a nomadic program that goes around in different places in New York City and allow immigrants to tell their stories and also engage in different situations. Like last year, I did a project at the High Line with the seniors that are in the Fulton Housing Project, and they told their stories of gentrification now. And by listening also, I forgot to do this. So by listening to these students, me at the time I was doing a practice like I selected from Project Luz, I realized that was my artwork, that Project Luz was my artwork. These pedagogical encounters and all these relationships that I was creating between communities, art institutions, and all other art spaces was my art project. So this is a project, for example, that I did in Turkey in a rural community with 200 people, and I did also a lending camera project. I lend the camera for the people to create their own photo albums, and then we share it. We share it in a public event. I also work with domestic workers and creating information that could help have a better relationship with their employees, and also at the same time is a tool to teach, to educate the workers. And most of my students are immigrants and workers, and also by listening to their problems, I started being involved in 2013 with an organization called NICE, New Immigrant Community Empowerment in Queens, and we started to thinking of ways to, we started with a conversation between union workers and day laborers. Day laborers are the workers that stand in the corner or in Home Depot, and they are being hired for the day, for a price. So they are the most vulnerable workers in the front line of all the abuses. And a big problem for them is wage theft. They don't get paid. Many times they go to work, when they come back, and they don't pay them, or they leave them in the middle of nowhere. So we started working with this organization to create an application using technology to so they can report this wage theft. And at the same time, this that was going to be a 6-month project, I'm still working on this project. So it's already 3 years. And it started with a group of 8 people in a room in Jackson Heights, and now it's something that is going to be, I'm working on, nationwide. So this engagement, the app is a collaboration between artists, organizers from the organizations, but also lawyers, researchers, and also the community. So we started this application. We realized that we needed more digital literacy, so I started teaching this Know Your Rights through Know Your Rights, and also Fight for Your Rights with your phone. And then I also started a project called the Worker Studio, where we get together and we think about our strategies to fight wage theft and all, in favor of labor rights. So also the workers became teachers, because I like also to bring these discussions to different spaces. So we did an immigrant worker forum at the Queens Museum, and this we did this year in April, where it was the workers were the teachers. They taught the kids how to paint, how to use different materials, and we also brought the discussion of wage theft, because it's also a population that is invisible, but we are trying also to make it visible. The app is already in the App Store, but now I got a residency at the Cornell Workers Institute, so I'm working with researchers to see how we can make better this application, how we can have all the workers to use it, how we can create more connections with the worker centers. So the way to imagine a form of this project, for me, is like a rhizome, like a root that is interconnected, and at the same time sometimes going with some public projects, but then continue connecting. And I am the artist that is doing this, crafting little by little all these relationships. So that's it. That's the project.
That was great, Sol. Thank you so much. Our next artist is Marisa Moran Jan. A transmedia artist of Ecuadorian and Chinese descent, Marisa founded Studio REV, a nonprofit whose key works include El Biblio Bandido, a masked bandit who eats stories, Video Slink Uganda, experimental films slipped or slinked into Uganda's bootleg cinemas, Byproduct, a book about embedded artists, Contratados, a Yelp for migrant workers, an audio novella app for domestic workers that CNN named as, quote, one of 5 apps to change the world, unquote, and The Care Force, a public art project and website with Oscar and Emmy-winning filmmaker Yael Amelamede, amplifying the voices of America's fastest growing workforce, caregivers, that includes 2 mobile studios, the Nanny Van, and the Care Force One. Jean has created 3 books about art and politics. Her work has been reviewed in the New York Times, Art Forum, BBC, Univision, CNN, Punk Planet, The Nation. She's been awarded grants from Creative Capital, the National Endowment for the Arts, the MAP Fund from the Doris Duke Charitable Trust, Sundance Institute, the Rockefeller Foundation, Tribeca Film Institute, and has also been showcased in various contexts ranging from the White House and to worker centers to museums such as the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art, the new museum, the Walker Arts Center, Yerba Buena Center for the Arts, the MIT Museum, and the Power Plant in Toronto. A graduate from MIT, John has taught at MIT, the American Museum of Natural History, the New School, and is an advisor to Northeastern University Schools of Law's innovative initiative, New Lab. Please help me welcome Marisa Moran-John.
Hi, thanks so much. It's an honor to be here with you guys. So in the 1930s and 40s, most workers in the US got basic rights like overtime wage, days of rest, and so forth. But Southern lawmakers intentionally excluded domestic workers and farm workers because they were largely African American. And then in 2010, domestic workers started organizing and sharing their story to lawmakers, and in 2010 passed the nation's first landmark Domestic Workers Bill of Rights. And to get the word out to the 200,000 domestic workers in New York, I worked with a group of domestic workers here to create what sounds like click and clack on car talk, but for nannies. So I'll share with you a clip.
I'm a ham Sammy, I'm a happy ham Sammy, no break for Nanny, she's never gonna eat me. Woohoo! Woohoo!
Not for long. Timesheet and record keeping. Mijas, hear that cuckoo clock? She's reminding you, keep good records of your hours worked and wages paid. This is Clara, reporting live from the inside of a vacuum cleaner. This place is packed with bedbugs, and the scene here is absolutely wild. These six-legged critters are notorious for infesting homes nationwide and drinking the blood of ordinary citizens.
Okay, so I'll stop right there. That app you can call in using any kind of phone, and you can access the audio novellas at any hour. The character-driven to make it comprehensible and also to make it stick. And then other states followed New York and started passing their Bill of Rights. So now we have 7, and to continue doing Know Your Rights tools. I went with my son and our creative tech team in our nanny van, and we traveled to different states to create more instructional tools. And our key partner in this was the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which is a group of 10,000 women in cities across America. And also the work that we did, while we reached tens of thousands of people on the ground, oops, crashed it. We reached millions more through the media. And so after the birth of my son, the care crisis that America is facing right now really hit home for me. And at the same time, my grandmother was in the twilight of her years, and we were fortunate that there was a caretaker who saw her through and was the last person to see her. And so I started thinking about the roles that domestic employers or people who are employing nannies, housekeepers, and caregivers can play in shifting relations of power and also how we think of and value care. And so I created the Care Force, which is the umbrella project, a public art project, transmedia initiative, web series, and our mobile studio, the Care Force One, to both continue reaching out to workers, but also reach domestic employers. So we continue to do tools that reach both. These are these collectible cards that use augmented reality to trigger these micro animations, and we've also been using dance, which is Zumba style dance, which is it's like a 2.5 minute song that narrates the movement and the history of domestic workers. And the web series that we're working on, it's myself and my son Choco in the car, and we're traveling across America discovering and finding care solutions to the care crisis. And so it's rife with tension like missing a nap. And so I'm interviewing and working with advocates and workers along the way. So then going back to the 1930s and 40s, when most workers got their rights and some were excluded, the U.S. is facing an immigration deadlock right now, and one of the reasons that we kind of get around it, or the industries have gotten around it, is by increasing the number of H-2A and H-2B visas, agricultural and non-agricultural visas, and which are rife with abuse and exploitation. And so I worked with, it's disproportionately Mexican migrants coming over with temporary visas were affected, and I worked with the two groups, Centro de los Derechos del Migrante and also Research Action Design, RADCAT. And we created Contratados, which is a Yelp site for migrant workers, and you rank and rate your employers, and the best thing that it provides actually is a job board, because you can look and see who has 5 stars and seek out that employer. And one of the features of the Contratados is these audio novellas that we created, as well as these pocket-sized comics that give you information about your rights. So again, character-driven. And the last project that I'll share with you is called El Bibli Bandido, and I've been working for like 18 years teaching K through 12, in particular literacy through bookmaking, to youth from under-resourced neighborhoods and communities. And I was working in Honduras with a group called El Pital, where there's an 80% illiteracy rate. And I was teaching bookmaking there for a short period of time. And to make the workshop stick, we created this character, El Bibli Bandido, which means book bandit or story thief. And the legend around him is that he eats stories, and he's so hungry for stories that he terrorizes little kids until they offer him stories that they've written. And so we have, after I left, they continue to do this every month. The third week of every month is Bibli Bandido Week. They invent new characters and new episodes, and they go out to the 19 participating villages to enact these episodes. And so this continues, and I've also been doing Bibli Bandido workshops with museums and after-school programs and libraries. And for, this is at the Queens Museum, and then also to introduce 21st century literacy to North American audiences, or this is a collaboration with the Seattle Public Library. We started integrating paper circuitry. So it teaches bookmaking, but also folds in, and the youth, like ages 6 through 11, which is a prime age when they'll still believe that Bibli Bandido might be a real character, they learn how to lay down a circuit and turn on a light and fold it into the story. So thank you.
Thank you, Marisa. Our last presenter for today is Sharon Lee de la Cruz. Sharon Lee de la Cruz is CEO and creative coder of the Digital Citizens Lab, a design collective with a focus on civic technology. Using play as a fundamental tool, Sharon and her team create resources for educators that can meet the needs of historically underserved children of color. Their primary product, El Cuco, is an interactive digital comic built to teach children code logic. Please help me welcome Sharon Lee de la Cruz.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here, so thank you for being here. I'm gonna try my best in limited time to address kind of this stuff, like why it's important for me to identify as a Latina artist, how do I use digital tools, and really what that means for inclusivity. And so this is me, this is what I look like, this is what my soul looks like, at least. And so 3 years ago, I started 3-4 years ago, I started thinking about artwork that was not static, right? So my background is in animation, illustration, and about 4 years ago, I just started thinking about things that were interactive. And one of the most frustrating things for me as an artist is when I can't create the thing that I think about or that I envision. And so that's super frustrating. So I realized, wait, I need to figure out how to do this, and then also realizing that I kind of needed to learn a little bit of code. But I wasn't going to go to a computer science course. That's not where I'm going. So I went to a place called ITP, Interactive Telecommunications Program at NYU Tisch. And since then, I've really, honed in on what I try to address as best as possible when making interactive art, which is accessibility. Where is technology and who's using it and how are they using it? And that tech really is something that is so fast that, dial-up was what I used growing up, and now that's the thing of the past. But then when I lived in Peru for a year in 2008, I was in Chincha, this small Afro-Peruvian town, and you had a locutorio, an internet cafe down the block, but you were still using the bathroom in a hole on the ground, right? So thinking expansively, what the hell is technology? And that technology is kind of everywhere, right? An iron is technology, how to sew is technology. I just think of technology more expansively than just an Arduino. And definitely storytelling, right? That, I can make a LED blink, but if there's no story, really, what am I getting out of it? So again, I had the privilege of going to ITP, and what's interesting here is that I knew I needed to learn technology, but not in a traditional way. And this is a wonderful 2-year graduate program, huge makerspace, and it really taught me how to make things rather than program, which was also pretty interesting. And so my thesis project is something called Dibuja tu Casa, Draw Your House. And what I ended up doing is redesigning the intake forms that lawyers use to capture information from unaccompanied minors crossing the US-Mexico border. And so I did that because in 2014, about 60,000 unaccompanied minors crossed the border. And I got to sit in these 45-minute interviews, and it's scary. It's really scary, and I am no psychologist, but I can see trauma, right? And I knew that these young people were experiencing trauma, and then when you ask someone who's experienced trauma the way these young people have, when you start just asking them questions in a traditional manner, you're just making them relive this trauma. And I thought that was pretty insane, and why isn't anyone doing anything about it? So I figured, how can I insert myself in this process? So I created Dibuja tu Casa, which is an app that uses, or what I ended up doing is collaborating with Catholic Charities in New York, and the lawyers and I sifted through about 3 questions that we thought were the most important for the young people to really answer. And a lot of it starts or stems from who's in your house, right? And what was interesting is that you want as much information as possible, right, from the young person, but how do you do that without making them feel alienated, but also what's the word? Kind of, you're not probing, into their lives. And so I figured, how do I express myself? And it's definitely through drawing. And I'm not creating anything new, right? This is art therapy. I just kind of digitized it and inserted it into this process. And right after ITP, during ITP, I met 2 wonderful people called Evan Wu and Leslie Martinez, and we created the Digital Citizens Lab, which is a design collective focused on civic tech and play, because we believe that play is an underutilized fundamental tool when creating meaningful interactions, and I love to play, and especially when you look at visa applications online, and when I started doing extensive research on immigration, I was like, this is the most horrifyingly designed thing ever. And we can do so much better. So during ITP, again, I realized that, so I came into grad school thinking I'm gonna learn how to code and awesome. And then I left saying, man, screw code. Let's create more. How do you create more expressive people through computational thought? So that is what we started honing in on with Digital Citizens is, yes, you can learn how to code, and that's awesome, but it's even better if you learn how to make, right? And creating makers that can express themselves is what I'm interested in. And so Tom Igo, one of our professors at ITP, and who created the Arduino, said, stop teaching programming, start teaching computational thinking, which I thought was like super exciting because, again, when you teach programming, you're teaching a job skill. When you're teaching making and computational thought, you're thinking about people. You're thinking about, literally, I didn't know I was going to grad school to be a better person, right? I thought I was gonna go code, and I'm like, wait, I know how to express myself in such a more expansive way, right? These are like new tools, but I don't have to be that programmer. I can be that thinker, and then I can learn that programming, which is really hard and probably sometimes not for me. But now that I know how these things are structured and I can see how things are built, man, oh man, does that change what I can create. So Digital Citizens Lab, we created something called Coding Comic, which is a digital platform that unfolds by solving code logic riddles. So again, what does it look like? I'm a comic nerd, and I hate to say it like that because I've only started really reading comics about 5 years ago when I was younger. I wasn't into it, but now I am, and I was like, well, how do you grab comics, and how do you grab this like love, or this love for computational thought, and how do you teach code logic? Because you can learn syntax and you can learn all of these different languages, but really it's about coding logic. And so we created this guy, and it's based off of, so Coding Comic is the platform, but we honed in on a story called El Cuco, right, the Latino boogeyman, and what it is it's loosely based off of The Three Little Pigs, where two brothers and sisters and a cousin have to they lucid dream, and they have to get El Cuco out of their kitchen. And so it looks a little something like this, right? Where you have a narrator and this goes quickly, so I apologize for that, but you have a narrator and the child reads the sentences, and they have to complete the images based off of what they're reading. So taking the logic of what they're reading and putting together these images so that they all make sense. And so this is an example right here. For this next page, when it comes up, we have, right? Abuela is telling the story of El Cuco. So you have to put El Cuco in, but let's say you put the unicorn in. Well, Abuela's not saying a story about the unicorn. So we put El Cuco in, and then what happens, right? Then Abuela makes these like scary hands, and then the next panel comes in, right? So it's literally a digital story that unfolds as you get that logic together. And so, we learned so much, and we were working with the Point CDC in the South Bronx, which I just happened to work for before I went to grad school, and we were looking at how do young people, specifically Latino young people, people of color ages 8 through 10, young people, how do they really react to these comics, especially comics about them, right? Is it about them? Do they even like any of this? And it was just really fun to test like Hour of Code programs versus our program, right? How do you get people to sit down? And I can tell you like some of the Hour of Code programs, some young people just like left the room. They just couldn't sit down, or not that they couldn't sit down, but it was frustrating, right? So is it meant for them? Is the design meant for them is kind of what I'm trying to push. So again, I'm just gonna leave you with right now what I'm thinking is building new tools, right? If these tools aren't for you, then let's build new ones. Or if they're even frustrating, build new ones. Or how do you remix a tool to the point where you're just creating new ones that are inherently inclusive is where I see us going, right? So you have like this VR set, but again, is it accessible to who, where, and is it for me, or is it for the people that I care about? And so you can find a whole bunch of stuff that I do on my portfolio, 163.com, and I talk a lot of crap on social media. So if you want to follow me there also, I swear 60% is probably my cat, but a good 40% is really good tech stuff. So yeah, thank you.
do a little Q&A. Wow, I'm so inspired by everything we just saw. That was all fantastic. Thank you all so much. One of the things I did as a moderator was to ask the 3 participating artists if there were issues that they were particularly interested in discussing. And Sol sent a really good idea to talk about the relationship between authorship and participation. That is, all of you create work with people, right? And so Sol, do you want to talk a little bit about that first?
Well, yes, I can talk a little bit, but for me, for example, when we did the application, it was through, collaborative sessions with the workers at the worker center, where I was learning how a jornalero work, how the transaction happened, and everything, and then we were trying to figure out together how an application to report wage theft could work into that, no? So, and I defended, because this is such a long project and with many organizations involved, I defended this model with other organizations that wanted to, always saying it's faster if we decide. No, we don't need to ask the workers because it's going to take a long time, a lot of energy. So I defended this idea through all the steps of and I still work like that.
That is that
Yes.
the workers' input was really important to the creation of the
Yes.
app itself,
Yes.
and they were a crucial part of the making of it.
Yes.
Well, I see that as what I really respect about the work that you guys do, and also what is really interesting to me about in making a decision to work with low-wage workers, immigrants, young people. It takes looking and listening and at very particular ways that people are using digital technology in order to create tools for that specific audience. And I also echo the frustration that you guys have felt where, working in a context, I went to grad school at MIT, and I was always frustrated because there's this assumption or this fallacy that there's this universal way of using technology. Whereas, and I found that the audience, the teams were just not diverse enough, or not thinking, or not encouraged or prompted to think about the particularities of how are people actually using technology. I mean, there's this classic example of when in the One Laptop for Child, there was this expectation that everybody needed their own laptop. But actually, the laptop was used most widely as a flashlight. But also, one of the things that I found that the way that people use technology and the way that I use technology is we learn as a group, and we don't learn individually. It's reinforced through soft points of interaction. And I like this process of listening because it's interesting, and that's a challenge that drives me, is how can I make tools or work that meets the particular needs of other people.
Yeah, and just, I guess, piggybacking off that, like when we were looking at Coding Comic and doing our initial research, it'd be, we said, okay, just a website, and then we realized you do some research, and about 90% of New York City POC, young people of color, are accessing web via their phone. So why the hell would I make a website unless it's responsive, right? Mm-hmm. Then you start thinking, okay, cool. How is that design really? How is your design paying attention to not just like the need, but access, right? Like, if I don't have a flashlight, how am I going to use this laptop? And then also, I realized that we're kind of screwed a little bit, because in ITP, I learned about human-centered design, and I was like, wait a minute, isn't all design supposed to be human-centered? And yes, that's bad. And so I realized, well, let's, instead of, I was depressed for a couple of weeks when I realized that title, but then I said, okay, screw that, let's talk about real human-centered design, where it's every step of your rapid prototyping, you're creating, you're thinking about people, and you have either the experience or the research to back those design decisions up.
So it's interesting that, you know, the participation aspect is a key component to the way the final product looks, of the way the final work looks. I think also about the history of art and participatory projects, and I think about someone like Marta Minujín, who in 1968 did a project here in New York at the America Society where she invited different groups of people. Some people were in the fashion industry, some were from the business world. There were others that were sort of more from the legal or political world. And she invited them all to a cocktail party at the America Society and gave them a list of questions for one another. And I think sort of was approaching this as kind of a sociologist almost, you know, where she's looking to see how these groups interact. Or someone like Mirle Eucalyptus, who had a project where she had decided she was going to shake the hand of every single sanitation worker for the New York City Department of Sanitation as a form of gratitude, you know, and really reaching out and physically, literally making contact with people. And so I think about your work in that conceptual way, but also in a way that comes from the street. You know, I think about the Young Lords, for example, who organized street actions in order to make changes in their community. And so I wondered if you think about your place fitting into this history of art or protest, and how you would put yourself into that that trajectory.
Well, I was thinking about your question about inspirations, and I daily think about 1001 Nights, Arabian Nights, which is a story that has been told over millennia by women primarily, who are reshaping and recounting the tale, and over many continents. And what's interesting to me about that, the story, is that it's a female protagonist, and she ends up saving her life and the life of others through storytelling. It's an allegory about the triumph of life over death through storytelling, and it's one that has carried over many continents and over time. And what's interesting to me is that it's when she's telling the story to Scheherazade, the female protagonist, when she's telling the story to the king, her sister is there in the room, and so she has a witness, to the storytelling. It's so interesting to me. So again, this both within the structure and in the retelling of the story over and over, there's this reshaping and active listening as well as creating.
Inspiration.
Yeah. Well, my background is in community organizing and getting frustrated with community organizing and how I want it to organize in a different way. And a lot of it is, my background is in mural making, and I still create murals, but I wanted to see how I could just put myself, insert myself into different systems, and when I thought about immigration, I was like, we're gonna change immigration. I was like, okay, in 4 months, that's not gonna happen. So let's figure out what we're gonna do to just reshape the narrative, right? Give young people agency. So just finding little slithers where you can insert yourself, that makes a hell of a difference. Because when you see a young person smile during an intake interview, you're just like, crap, this is crazy, right? Like, it gave me goosebumps because I'm thinking, wow, even if for that moment, there's some relief out of all of this. And that comes from the frustration of community organizing where, I felt there wasn't enough self-care built in to these nonprofits that I was working with, and I love them. I am a product of teen activists, nonprofit. But again, really thinking about self-care, and art is my self-care and is how I express myself. So really spreading how you can express yourself. And again, thinking about computational thought for me is just a tool for self-expression. I'm like, you gotta learn this, right? Not only because, jobs, fine, of course, right? We need them, but we need people to just think in, be able to think in a more expressive way, so that inherently I think that self-care is in what you do and make. I don't know if I answered your question, hopefully.
Yeah, completely. Well, you brought up things like muralism and comics. Also, I think these are two fantastic examples of tools that have been used in art history, but also from the ground up, kind of, right? And I think about photography and the act of teaching photography that was in a way for people to learn to even support themselves through photographing, right?
Yes, what I think, I consider myself an artist and an activist too. And when you were talking about inspirations, I was thinking about Tucumán Arde, Graciela Carnevale. So this project, Tucumán Arde, was during the dictatorship in Argentina, and they sent a group of artists, the government, to Tucumán, a city in the north, where there were a lot of abuses, labor abuses happening. And these artists work, like, you know, the description of the rhizome. In the surface, they were doing what the government asked them to, organizing this art exhibition about, you know, nothing important, just more aesthetics. But in the underground, they were meeting with the workers of the sugar mill, learning about writing down, documenting all the abuses, and then they came back and they did a huge exhibition about what was happening in Tucumán. So I also see the work of an artist as an organizing, a lot of the work underground, connecting different dots, and especially me working on immigration and art, and then, you know, few things that go to the surface.
Excellent. I wonder if there are any questions from the audience.
And just one more thing, too.
Oh, yes, sure.
I just wanted to mention the reason I got into comics was Persepolis, the graphic novel. I thought that was like mind-blowing. I was like, crap, you are putting in history and feminism and all in one thing. And it was just a beautiful way to clearly state a complex history and feminism in context to this complex history. And I thought that was pretty badass when it comes to storytelling. And I was like, I want that. That's what I want to keep doing.
Absolutely. I use that hashtag badass all the time.
Nice.
Questions for our fantastic artists? Yes. Oh, sorry. It's being recorded, so use the mic, please.
More than a question is actually, I think, like a comment of surprise that the three of you mentioned that you were making a decision of like be really like user-centered, community-centered, and you have like to like really make a point of it. With like the point is like for me right now, even the most soulless corporation that is whose like goal is only to make money, they are using techniques where it's completely designed is user-centered and test-centered, and also like storytelling is getting into any commercial process of design. So I guess like sometimes it's like, it's not only you as artists or anything, it's like this way of like putting the user first and putting their need first and not giving them a solution to the problem, but a tool to develop the solution to the problem. It's everywhere. And sometimes I guess like if we have to, if you are very into the art world, you have to go and look how commercial places are working, because they are actually using storytelling, user-centered things like you are. And it's everywhere. So I think that's very interesting, like intersection, where commercial is getting to the point where you are struggling to get to. So it's very interesting for me, that connection.
Say something about that, because there's a difference when what you see, you think that you are part of a community and participating, to tokenism. When you think that you're participating, but it's not really your story. So I'm going to give you an example of engagement. I was working for 2 years in a project at Corona Plaza in Queens, and we were developing with the community ideas, proposals of things for that plaza, that piece of land that was a parking lot. And so we were working for 2 years, and then the Department of Transportation did a meeting in Spanish for us to get to know the community and to also get our suggestions and ideas. So they did these meetings. We were only 14 people. There was one person that talked in Spanish. They didn't ask any of the people to introduce themselves. They gave us floor plans and to, okay, make a drawing. Where do you want a tree? Where do you want this? Where do you want that? And that was the whole engagement. So a lot of the people in the community felt betrayed because it was this commercial idea of, okay, let's include the community, you know, and so you think that you're participating, you think that your opinion is important, but actually something that is done because it has to be done, but not really is going to take into account. That is very different to start a project that you don't know what you're going to do. You get together with the community to think it through and make something to resolve that problem. So that would be a different on participation. When the person have created participation, on when the person, they're asking your opinion, but it's you know, one more thing that they're doing.
To piggyback on that, I wanted two things. I wanted to say that there, when we created the domestic worker app, we created in 2010 when smartphones weren't widespread. There's no corporate or commercial incentive for them to create, for like a corporation or commercial enterprise to create an app for domestic workers, which is the most, you know, like the majority on the poverty line. And so we had an interesting experience when we were doing the user testing, which was that we found that domestic workers, you know, we would say it's for any kind of phone, and they'd say, oh, well, you know, I don't have a smartphone. No. So we have to show them. But it's a different what's interesting is that it's a different kind of engagement. It's not like download the app. It's like, let me show you. And then they feel like this little taste of like digital enfranchisement means that you have a sense of power. So, you know, all that to say that I think the way that the three of us are working is you're not only creating a tool or a product, but we're also creating a movement. You know, it's like there's larger movement building or history changing goals that I think we all share. And the second thing is also with like digital, you know, app engagement is that what's not taken into account is how people might not, like how people are using that differently, and also how corporations or commercial enterprises might be data mining in a way that, or invading privacy levels that is a real concern, especially for people who are undocumented.
Maybe I didn't give a good background. I was talking about like using those techniques to actually develop a better design, and I was like more design centered. Like I'm not defending any of the corporate practices at all, but like how things they develop can be useful, and especially I was talking about developing apps and very specific, like I'm not defending any of the other practices you were talking about.
Any other questions from the audience?
May I ask, have you contacted the Spanish-speaking? Okay. Have you contacted the Spanish-speaking coding community to see if they could help you with a project like this? Just recently, we had in New York City, don't take this the wrong way, but it was a hacking convention. And it was something that there were a lot of people there that probably, you know, all they do is just write code, and they will like this idea.
Okay.
Did you get the question? Or?
Yeah.
Okay, the question is how you contacted the Spanish coding community at all? Some people in Barcelona might come up with a program that you need.
Yeah. I mean, sure. No, we haven't gotten
Maybe
into
we
that.
need their email, and then we can contact them.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's also the three of us identify as educators who are enfranchising and increasing and augmenting the coders who are people of color.
Yeah.
And immigrants.
But yeah.
Ooh, there goes my phone. Hi. I'm just curious, do you self-identify more as artists? Like what is your identity primarily? I worked for several years basically empowering people through media, teaching women in Cambodia to use video to affect social change when the UN peace mission was there. And in Africa as well, I always identified as as an NGO, a person who was empowering them, never as an artist. And I'm always very, very fascinated now. I don't know if it's because of the technology, how that connection has been made as artist activist.
Well, I identify as an artist and educator, artist and activist, artist and da-da-da-da-da.
Ditto. I think the same thing. I mean, on my LinkedIn, it says artist. And sometimes I feel a little self-conscious about that. I'm like, who am I? But yeah, but essentially it's like, look, I draw. You know, like, okay, that's going to be the first thing you see. You know, so great, I make art. But for me, right? And actually that was, I remember in high school, senior year, when you're deciding, you know, what you're going to do for the rest of your life, whatever. I told myself I have to go to a 4-year, you know, liberal arts, like university and study psychology. And then when I realized you can get a bachelor in fine arts, I was like, hell yeah, that's it. One is because I've known for a while that the word artist just means you're making things, and you can learn about psychology, you can learn about engineering, a whole bunch of different things, and put that together. So I didn't want to limit myself. So yeah, I just have to keep owning the word artist. Sometimes it makes me cringe, but you know, it is what it is.
And when she was saying that, I was thinking, if I have listened to my father that say, why don't you study law and take a painting class instead of... I wanted to be an artist since I was a kid, so it's something that I study architecture to negotiate with my family, the closest thing to art, and then, you know, I became who I wanted to be. So as an artist, I borrow all kind of strategies to do the practice, and as I told you, I work with lawyers, with organizers. I'm an organizer, but through art, and activist, anything. And when I work with, I'm not a developer or coder, but I work with, so I borrow and I gather people from all disciplines to create these projects.
I also think I'm the most useful as an artist, as in I'm not as useful as a bookkeeper, for example.
Yeah. Well, I think the key thing here is that you've all begun to use art as like the platform for the tool, right? Which I think is, museums really are about that too. You know, we put objects on display because we're telling stories and interpreting them for people to understand and make connections with the artwork and with the artists and the ideas behind it. And what you've been able to do is maybe extend that a little bit further and a hand to the community to have a kind of back and forth, right? Do we have any final questions?
One more thing that is sometimes also related to what she asked, that is, we empower the community. I mean, I think we empower each other, and the community empower themselves, no? Because they are their stories, so it's not something like so top down, but more like a...
And to speak to that, it's exactly how I like to teach. I come in and it's like, well, look, I know a lot about this, but actually I'm still learning, so let's talk about it. And actually I've learned more about comics by teaching comics than by reading them, which is kind of crazy. But you know, when folks start reinterpreting, you know, different panels for themselves, you're like, wow, that's actually like really fantastic. And then you understand how then and I feel like it made me a better storyteller and comic book creator, because I can now understand the way someone else understands image and text together.
I also feel like in working as an artist, it keeps me the most fresh or inspired by other people, and also the most vulnerable, because it is listening and learning and changing course.
Yeah, that sounds exactly it. As opposed to the language before of NGOs where you're doing human resource development, you're transferring skills, you're giving them the power to basically do it, but it's a different language where with the term artist you're freed up.
And I would never take that job if someone called me like human resource,
Yes.
what? You know, like,
And also
I've done that. Wasn't very good at that.
No, and also I think that also that implies, you know, one person coming to a community to do something, and it's like it's actually something that I don't want to do, or the way that I don't want to be seen. No, this person is going to come to save us, and
Capacity building, you're saying. Yeah.
Basically saying, I'm not going to come as though, the educated or whatever to this other community and impart my wisdom on them. I'm going to help them have the skills. Like, I'm not going to tell their story for them. I'm going to give them the skills so they can tell their own story and continue telling their own story, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Right.
So
I think it's even more narrow for me, where I feel like I'm creative capacity building.
The humans are the resource. Right? Yes. Oh, there's microphone coming. Sorry. 1 second.
Thank you, Madam. The three of you show a pure passion towards what you do. Interesting that the three of you have attacked, let's put it this way, a different field. Now, proposing these ideas to make it true or reality, to make it into real life, how do you propose to a private field for the funds, or to the government or state field for the funds? How easy is for you to get the funds to build these ideas into reality?
Okay, it's very difficult because the art, the people that fund art, they don't want to fund classes or workshop. It has to look like something else. So, because if not, while I'm pushing pedagogy as a way of making art, and it's, I think, what I'm doing, the funders, they don't understand that, so we have to tell a different story according to the funder. But I'm going to say, for example, my app ended up being funded by, well, I got a grant from Blade of Grass, and then the IFL-CIO. So it's the umbrella of all the unions, no? And this project started as a conversation between union workers and day laborers. In that conversation, the union workers told one of the day laborers, why you come here? Why you're taking our jobs? What I'm saying, like, no, please, this is exactly what I don't want. Like, I don't want to expose the worker to this kind of conversations, or like, so I'm never going to work with the union. I don't think that, I don't like the union. But then I learned, no, during 3 years, how it wasn't through me that we got the IFL-CIO, but yes, through Endilon, the umbrella organization of all the day labor centers, that they got this partnership. So, funding comes in different ways. Then, we have Cornell Workers Institute, like supporting with research. So this same idea of multidisciplinary work, collaborations, I think we also move it to multidisciplinary funding.
I think you're right in saying that it is a challenge. With the domestic worker app, for example, the art funders want to see it as they like to fund projects, but this is something that's ongoing, and we're always releasing we're in like 2 weeks, we're releasing audio novellas in Portuguese for Brazilian housekeepers in Boston who just got their Bill of Rights. And, it's tricky to receive funding for maintenance. I mean, this is something in other sectors too, in other like civic initiatives, but also true for us.
Yeah, and with Coding Comic, that's what we're going through now. It's like, how do we create this prototype and get funding to actually develop the platform? What we've been doing, though, is it's literally in the research, kind of like disproving or proving, this narrative, a narrative, and saying, look, this is why you need this product. And then, it helps when you can make it visually enticing. Also, just to play in with, like, look, if you can draw, go ahead, right? Like use the aesthetic part to push really, that bigger concept. And so that's what we're doing with Coding Comic, is not only showing the research that we've done, which is not funded, right? It is us, and saying, look, we've done this research. We have X amount of, articles or scholarly articles that we found that coincide with our research, and then we have this MVP, this prototype that we can show you. And the minute they can start interacting and seeing what you see, that's exciting. The only thing is we're not being funded. Well, we got a processing foundation grant, really small grant that gave us the opportunity to even make an initial proof of concept, right? So finding those like wonderful organizations that will like splurge at least, just like these little bit of money to do that research and then say, okay, how do we maximize this so that when we get funding? But it is a vicious cycle of like, well, how do you actually create this bigger thing and get funding?
Ladies, thank you for all of the work that you're doing. Thank you for your
Thank you.
brilliance today. Thank you to the audience. Will you all help me thank our guests once again? And let's not forget there's another reason that we're here today too. Are you going
Yeah.
to say something about that? The Wikipedia?
Yes. So we have a platform that we're going to focus on today, as many of you know, Wikipedia. We're using basically this whole building. So I just wanted to give you a little orientation to the rest of the day's event. So definitely pick up one of these sheets. I have more. We have some on the first floor. Starting at 11:30, for those of you who have not edited Wikipedia